Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Harry Lauseneziris, and this is my chess YouTube channel, grecochess. Today we're continuing with the Connecticut Open chess tournament that took place 3 days ago, September 20th, at the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut. I'm going to show the third game that I played. But before I start, let's share once again the information about the tournament. 4 rounds, meaning every player is expected to play 4 opponents. Well, one can skip perhaps a round with what's called a bye, but usually players want to play all the 4 rounds. And the various sections are the following. Open, everyone is eligible, and usually the top players play there because they're not eligible for the other ones. Under 2100, your rating needs to be below 2100 to be eligible. Under 1700, that's where I participated. You needed a rating less than 1700, and mine was 1582. Under 1200, under 700, and the non-rated. Time controls for the top sections, including my own, it is G45 plus 10. What does this mean? It means that when the game starts, players have 45 minutes on their clocks. When the opponent, of course, is thinking, your clock does not move. When it is your turn to think, the clock goes downwards. But once you complete your move, you add 10 seconds. This is what's called the increment, the plus 10. This means that the games can be very long because players may seem to be low in time, but if they add 10 seconds in every move, this can add quite a lot. And of course, you must play your move before your clock shows 0, otherwise you lose because of time. And before we go to the game, a few photos of the tournament that I took. The entrance, once you enter the building, this is the registration. You see these two wonderful statues on the left and the right, the logo of the university in the middle, and the tables with the registration, the names of the people that have registered. So once you enter, you look under your section and you see if your name has been listed properly. And the other photo I'd like to share with you is inside the playing hall. What you may want to notice is that on every table there is a chessboard with the pieces set properly for the beginning of the game. And after I took the photo, but before the game started, the organizers would add the clocks that have been carefully calibrated to display the 45 minutes with a 10-second increment. I would really like to thank the organizers. This happens rarely. In most tournaments have been players have to bring their own boards and clocks. The only two tournaments that organizers took care of it are Cheshanit in Long Island and this one in Connecticut. Thank you very much. It made the players' life so much easier. Time now to start the game. After I share with you the information about my opponent. His name is Aidan Wang. His official rating is 1389, but after a few games he played after that, his published rating went down a little bit to 1375, and this will become his official rating October 1st, as you see. And he's in the 78.7 percentile. Compare this with my numbers. My official rating was 1582. It will become 1609 after the New York State tournament and the Cheshanity one, and I'm in the 87th percentile. What does this mean? It means that the odds are on my favor. But let's see what actually happened. We have all these wonderful odds, but you may lose in the chessboard. Here is a chessboard for chess.com where I'm going to enter the moves one by one as I'm reading them from the score sheet. After every move, the computer is going to show who is better, the evaluation. Positive number means white is better, negative black is better. If the move played was the best, if not, which would have been the best move, and what are the best 3 options for the other player. I had the white pieces and Aidan had the black. And I start with the Scotch Gambit, as it's called. It's very dangerous for black if they are not very well prepared. You need to know by heart the moves, otherwise, if you play the most logical, you may find yourself checkmated before you know what's happening. And in friendly games, I've been able to defeat quite strong players that way. Here you see white pushes a pawn to e5 and attacks a black knight. If the black tries to save the knight by moving it who knows where, the game is lost. Instead, black needs to play a move that he must know by heart. Pawn goes to d5. That's what my opponent did. Bishop goes to c5. Now the knight is in danger, goes to e4. I take here the pawn. And black moves the bishop to c5. 7 moves until now, it's completely theory, book moves. Move number 8. The computer would like me to develop my bishop to e3. Second chess move is castling, and the third option is the knight develops to c3. Instead, I did what I saw on the internet, which doesn't seem to be any of the 3 options. Take the knight on c6. Pawn takes it back. And of course, now I on my own. I castle, even though the computer wants me to push my bishop to e3. Mistakes as a computer, because as you see here, bishop can go to a6, my rook goes to e1, not to get lost, and in fact, that's not even the best move. The best move for the computer would be my pawn to go to f3 and attack the knight and lose the exchange. It's quite a complicated line, but I castle kingside. Queen goes to d7 for black, and this is a blunder. Why is the blunder? It was not obvious, and when my opponent played it, I didn't realize it, and the moment I played my next move, which I'll tell in advance, my bishop goes to e3, I realized the chance I had missed. Why? Because the knight on e4 is in a very bad position. Cannot go to d6, to f6, the pawn will take them. Cannot go to g5, because now the bishop will take it. To g3, any of the 2 pawns, to f2, rook or king, d2, 3 ways to take it, knight, bishop or queen. In fact, I want to take it to the queen, otherwise I'm losing my knight on d4. If it goes to d2, I have to take it back with my queen. Of course, c3, it is both pawn and knight, and c5, it's taken by the bishop. I played my bishop to e3, and then I spotted the chance I had missed. But what do you do in chess? It is not uncommon to have a great move, play an inferior, and only then realize the great move you had missed. What you should not do is regret and start thinking, what if, why did I do this, why did I do that, how come I miss it, and lose concentration. Instead, you should say, okay, it happened. We continue. In fact, the position was equal. I was not lost in any sense. So forget about the chance I missed. Let's see what I can do from now on. Sometimes they say it's even better not to realize a chance you had missed during the game, because you don't have to go through all these worries. But myself, I decided no reason to worry. As I say, over spilled milk. Let's continue. Bishop goes to e7. So I then realized, I believe, the mistake. That's why the knight has 2 squares to go. Both c5 and g5. g5, if I take it, the bishop takes it back. Avoided this danger, this possibility. And at this moment, we finish the first 10 moves. The game is more or less even, 0.31 advance for me. Basically, it's due to the fact that I started with white first. But we continue. Computer wants me to place my pawn on f3, but I was afraid to do it. First of all, I wouldn't win the knight. And second, I would open the diagonal from fa7 to g1, where my king is located, and I didn't want to have to worry about a bishop or a queen taking this diagonal. That is why I pushed the other pawn to c3. Short castling for black. My knight goes to d2. I want to exchange this knight. I don't like the knight being on e4 with the black knight. In my half of the board, exerts pressure on f2, is supported by the pawn on d5, not a good omen. I want to exchange it. And Aidan doesn't want to exchange it. Knight goes to c5. I try again to exchange it. My knight goes to b3. Aidan sends it to e6, and now I don't want to exchange any longer because the knight is way to the back. Is not causing the problems it might cause before. I now want to win the c6 pawn. How? Knight goes to to a5. Pawn attack twice. Defended only once. If the bishop tries to go to b7, it's lost by my knight. Maybe the knight could go to d8, but this would mean that the black knight is all the way back. And in addition, makes more difficult the coordination of the two rooks. Instead of having only the bishop to move, now you have bishop and knight to move. That is why I done. The computer would prefer this, however. But I done played the second best move, knight takes knight. I thought that was the best move. How will I take it back? Pawn, bishop, or queen? No matter how I would take it back, this piece would have to support the pawn on e5. Not attacked yet, but it would. And I don't want to have a queen or even a bishop having no other role than protect the e5 pawn. That's why I took it with my pawn. Many times, if you can take back and protect a piece, do it the most quote-unquote economic way with the least important piece. That's why the computer really says the best. Queen goes to e6, continue support of the c6 pawn. In addition, helping the bishop go to d7 for more support. I put my rook on c1, and now the bishop goes to d7, and I attack the pawn twice, defended twice. How can I attack it even more? Queen goes to c2, pawn attacked 3 times, defended twice. Now there is no way it can be defended a third time. The other bishop is on a dark color, while c6 is light color. The rooks cannot go anywhere. The king cannot go anywhere. So Aidan does the only thing that he could. He pushes the pawn to c5. I can take it again. And when he was thinking, I was thinking, okay, he moves to c5, I can still take it because it's attacked 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, defended only once. But then I realized I take it, in fact, that's what the computer wants to take it. But I take it, computer takes e5, actually not computer, black takes on e5. And what this means is a pawn that I had central goes to the edge while I lose another central pawn. I didn't want this thing, that's why I attack even more with my knight on b3. It's going to be lost again. And I then push it to c4. Now this pawn is well protected, becomes quite strong in my half the board, protected by d5, protected by the queen on e6, protected by the pawn on f7, protected by the king on g8. But the other pawn on c7 is still weak, but at least I done solved one of his 2 pawn weaknesses. I have to save my knight before anything else. Knight goes to d2. And queen goes to g4, facing my king. If black could have one more piece to support the attack, for example, of bishop on h3, black could threaten me with mate. In the meantime, I want to expand myself. And now that I don't face the danger on the diagonal from a7 to g1, face a different kind of a danger, I push my pawn on f4, protecting the pawn on e5 and potentially starting a strong attack. Bishop goes to f5 and threatens my queen. And we completed the first 20 moves. Black has an advantage 0.90. Well, it's not yet crucial, but it is an advantage. He's starting an attack until now. I was the one that had the initiative, attacking the c pawns and so on. Now it's black that starts little by little having initiative. It's always better if you are the one attacking and your opponent defends rather than the other way around. What do we do? First of all, let's exchange the queens so I don't have to worry because just with the bishop, the attack is not going to be dangerous. I wanted to exchange the queens, and the computer wants black to exchange the queens and then bring the rook from f8 to b8. But black had no access to the computer, didn't know this was a computer idea. Black thought the same thing with me. If queens are exchanged, the attack is over along the g file. Places the queen back to g6. I send my knight to f3. Well, if there's going to be an attack, let's have as many pieces in defense as possible. Plus, I'm threatening, not yet, but I would threaten a fork with a knight on h4 if the bishop was not on e7. Rook goes to b8, but not the f that the computer wanted. The a rook to go to b8 attacks my pawn on b2. Computer wants me to defend it with my rook from f1 to f2, but I don't want a rook to be occupied just for defense. But also this rook would defend the g2 pawn if there could be any danger. But I felt it would be better, and it is not better, to push my pawn to b3. I was expecting exchange of pawns, but Aidan had a different idea. Bishop goes to a3, and the moment I saw it, I got scared. It looks like a repetition of my previous game. Rook has very few squares to go. b1, c2, taken by the bishop. a1, bishop goes to b2, and rook is lost. c3, same story. Bishop goes to b2, and rook has nowhere to go. And then I was really feeling very bad because I was feeling that we're going to have a repeat of the previous game, and little by little, my opponent's advantage will become bigger and bigger. So that I realized my opponent had some advantage, is going to become stronger and stronger. And before I knew it, I would have to resign like the previous game. But just I was desperate and the time was ticking. I saw a way out of that. Because now the bishop was not on e7 any longer, I could place my knight on h4 and fork the opponent's bishop and queen. So if I lose my rook, I win a queen. If the queen moves, I have enough time to think about what to do my rook. I can take my bishop as a first step, and then with this bishop not here any longer, my rook could go to a lot of squares. For even c2, for example, or b1, it would be attacked by the queen, but defended by my queen. So at that time, I started feeling some relief. I was expecting the queen to move anywhere, and the only thing I was not expecting was black to take my rook on c1. You'll see here the computer say it's a great move. Of course, the game had no idea why it was great, and I was wondering why does my opponent, why does Aidan give me a queen for a rook? But as I say, don't look a gifted horse in the mouth. After I made sure that it was a gifted horse, or at least I thought so, I grabbed the queen. And then I realized what was going to happen, even though I couldn't see anything better. I saw the combination, but I didn't see any way out. The computer would rather have me lose the exchange by taking the bishop on c1 and keep the pin. But what black did is first takes the bishop. Okay, lost a rook and a queen for a bishop. Not a big deal, because then I'm going to put my knight on e7, check, and win the bishop. But then I saw, no, it is a check. I must move my king. My king goes to h1 to avoid further loss of material. And now black can take my knight. And they are going to have one rook and one bishop and one knight for the queen, which is more than enough. Queen is 9, rook 5, bishop 3, knight 3, 111 points for the price of 9. But black has 3 ways to take it. Any of the 2 pawns, but this means doubling the pawns, or with a bishop. And black was thinking, and then I saw it's, if black takes my bishop, I'm going to win the bishop. And black didn't see it, was afraid of doubling the pawns, and takes the bishop. And this put me back in the game, because now the bishop on g6 is lost. The bishop on g6 is lost. My pawn goes to f5. And what can black do? If they take my pawn, my rook takes it. If they go to h5, my queen takes it. What black does is they saw that there was no way to save the rook, so decided to do a counterattack. Pawn goes to c5. If I'm greedy enough and want instant gratification to take the bishop, pawn goes to d4, and it becomes an extremely dangerous pawn. Materially, we might be more or less the same, or one side may have one pawn more than the other, but this pawn at d4 is very, very dangerous. And that is why I decided to delay gratification. And instead of taking the bishop immediately, I take the pawn, and I knew that the bishop was still not going to be saved. Bishop takes at f5, and it's now or never. So I take the bishop, and black sends the rook to d8 because now the pawn on d5 is in danger. My rook goes to f3 to attack the bishop, and the bishop takes the pawn. Computer wants me to play c6 with the idea of going to c7 and forking the rooks. Of course, black should send the bishop on b6, and that would be better. But bishop goes to c5, and we completed the first 30 moves. See how is the game. From black having a big advantage after they let me take back this bishop, now it's more or less even. I have a very small advantage of 0.08 after 30 moves. Anything can happen. Materially, we both have 19 points. 9 for me, 9 queen plus 5 rook plus 5 pawns is 19. For black, 2 rooks is 10, and another 3 for bishop 13, and 6 pawns 19. Materially, we're the same. Position approximately the same, but it's very asymmetrical, since I have a queen and my opponent does not. So we both need to be extremely careful how to continue. A small slip can decide the game. My queen goes to f1 to attack the pawn on f7. Black defends it, rook goes to b7. I take the pawn on c4. Black takes the pawn on c4, which creates a very dangerous past c4 pawn. Also, there are problems with back rank mates for both sides. My king is on h1 with the g1 covered by the bishop. So if black could if my queen could be away from the f1 from the first rank, black could send his rooks and it could be an easy checkmate. On the other side, black has his king covered by 3 pawns in front of it. So perhaps under correct conditions, I might have a chance for a checkmate, especially with my queen being able to move faster all over the board. I decided to solve the back rank issue by moving my pawn to g3 so the king, if necessary, can escape to g2. Black sends the rook to d4 to protect the passed pawn on c4. It's a very important pawn. If black loses it, the balance will be very strong in my favor. My queen goes to h3, threatening check and winning the rook. It's not back rank yet because the bishop could go to f8, but winning the rook, pinning the knight, that would be wonderful, but black sends his rook to b1 with a check. I have to be careful. My king has one square to escape after creating what's called the Luft, the air. Without it, if the pawn was on, well, the queen was here in f1. I'm not sure what would happen, but here I have to be careful because if I send my king to g2, the only square my king can go, rook goes to d2, rook goes to f2, and because of the bishop, then the rook from d2 can take f2 and it's mate. Let me count. I'm 3 moves from checking mate if I don't do this calculation and I move my king to g2. But fortunately, I saw it, and fortunately, I had another way to defend myself. Rook goes to f1. Black decides enough is enough. Rook goes back to b8 to avoid checks from the 8th rank, even though the bishop was protecting. But this would mean, of course, that if I would check and the black bishop goes to f8, then this bishop cannot support any attack. Queen goes to f5. and threatens the pawn at f7. Rook goes to f8. The computer would rather have me start pushing the e6 pawn. Rook goes to f8, defends this threat. My pawn goes to this is, and now we completed the first 36 move. Computer says it's a great move. After 36 moves, this score is more or less even. I have a very small advantage of 0.81. Material-wise, every side has 18. I have a pawn on e5 that might be able to promote, but my opponent has a very strong passed pawn on c4 that is much easier to promote. And while I created some luft, some air for my king is not too safe. While black king with the rook on f8 is quite safe. But let's see what's going to happen. Move 37, I push my pawn to e6 and I create a double threat. An immediate one on the bishop on c5, and also a possibility of checking f7. And of course, it's not a mate. Rook, if rook takes, of course, it's very dangerous, but the king could go to h8, and I'm not sure how to continue. So my opponent, I done with the black pieces, had to deal with these two possibilities. He saw the danger of the check and decides to defend it by pushing his pawn to f6. This really makes it much tougher for my pawn to go and get promoted. Of course, the bishop covers e7. Perhaps the two rooks can go and grab it. So my pawn on e6 seems has no future, but my opponent forgot about the bishop. And finally, move 38, I grab the bishop. And so from a game being almost even, now I have a great moves as a computer. It was very obvious. I have an advantage of 6.03. Even at my worst times, my opponent never had such a big advantage. They're about a little bit more than 4. And the odds are very heavily stacked on my favor, but will I be able to finish it? If I make a similar mistake, my opponent could easily win. Or if there are any hidden possibilities I'm not aware. If the c pawn, for example, moves, that's it. My opponent, first of all, saves the rook, sends it to e4. And now, instant gratification, take the pawn on a7 and also make my a2 a passed pawn. Even though it's in the very beginning, it has a lot of potential. My opponent decides nothing else. Let's at least get rid of the passed e6 pawn. So at this point, what do we have? I have queen and rook versus two rooks. My opponent has an passed pawn on c4. I have a passed pawn on a2 that just it has not even begun its journey. My queen goes to d7 to threaten the rook on e6. And I then decide to have the two rooks protect each other and avoid any chance that my queen can check the king while attacking another rook. Because even if this happens, the second rook is there to defend. And my queen is going to go to d5 to pin the rook. If I could play again, I would use this pin to send my knight, for example, to e1, exchange rooks, and then have queen versus rook. But Aidan does not like it, sends his king to h8. So I cannot put my rook on e1. I lose it. Before, because of the pin, I wouldn't lose it. And now let's get rid of the c4 pawn. My queen takes the pawn at c4. I don't have to worry about the c4 suddenly going to c1 and getting promoted. Aidan is not sure what to do because he wants his rooks to continue protecting each other. If he pushes his fgh pawns too much, it'll be taken. So starts playing his rooks up and down. Rook goes d7. My pawn starts his journey. My a pawn starts his long journey with the first step going to a4. Rook goes to a8. Pawn goes to e5. Pawn goes to g6 for black. Why? Because at least they avoid a back rank possibility. But my pawn uses this chance to continue the journey to a6. Rook goes to e7, and pawn goes to a7. Of course, the rook on e7 can take it, but then I grab the other rook on e6. Black in desperation wants, okay, we cannot stop the pawn from promoting, but at least let's make sure it doesn't come with a check. And in many cases that are very close, promotion with check can tip the balance. Promotion without a check would make the other side win, but with a check can make the player with a check winning the game. King goes to g7. And now queen promotion. And you're going to see that the same pawn had 5 moves in a row. We'll play them again one by one to see how from a2 in 5 moves it got promoted. What happens after here? What did not happen, my opponent did not resign and continued fighting. You may remember the first game, although I had an enormous advantage, even at the last moment, my opponent had a stalemate trick. Here, stalemate is not so easy because my opponent has to lose a lot of material to even start thinking about stalemate. King goes to h6. Queen goes to g8. Now, I have made, believe it or not, in 2 moves. Queen goes to f8. And no matter where the king goes, queen goes to h4 mate. I didn't see it. Queen goes to g8. Rook goes to e4 to attack my queen. Queen checks from c1. Defense by the pawn g5. I cannot take it. The f6 pawn will cover it. And once I had mate in 2 moves. And the first I play correctly. Rook goes to f6. King goes to h5. And believe it or not, I had mate in 1. There is a saying, if you see a good move, always look for a better. And there is an ironic twist. If you see check in, if you see a mate in 1, look for a better move. Of course, that's not what I did. I didn't see the mate. So instead of directly playing the mate and completing the game, my queen goes to d1 with a check. Rook covers at e2. My rook goes to f2 to take advantage of the pin and win the rook. King goes to h6. And I win the rook. Pawn goes to g4 for black. My queen goes to d6 with a check, and I'm going to win the rook on e7. King goes to h5. But do you have anything better than winning the rook? Queen goes to d5 check. Rook goes to e5. Queen takes on e5. King goes to h6, and queen goes to g5 and checkmate. In 57 moves, I had my second win. I have 2 out of 3 wins until now. Of course, my opponent Aidan, he played a very good game, and especially sacrificing his queen and seeing how much material he would get and reaching a very strong position after that. Really, he needs to be congratulated by that. Because it's not just memorizing some openings, but seeing this difficult to notice combination. And overall, with the exception of the one mistake, I mean, he made 2 mistakes. The other one was when he let me take the knight in the beginning and I failed to notice. And the other one when he didn't notice a bishop near the end of the game and he lost it. Other than that, he played a really very good game. Congratulations, Aidan, and of course, I wish him all the best in his future, chess future. Just to tell you that my first 3 opponents in rounds 1, 2, and 3 were all small school children, and I really wish all 3 their best in their chess career and in their lives in general. And they and their parents would be very proud for taking the initiative to come to Bridgeport, to play in the tournaments, and to achieve what they were able to do. But let's see now, what does the review of chess.com have to say? Chess.com is not so flattering now. Maybe we had too many inaccuracies and mistakes near the middle, plus the blunders. 75.3 accuracy for me, 70.0 for black, and I played as if my rating was 1800, a little bit above mine, and 1550, a little bit above Aidan's. Not so flattering like in other games, but that's what the computer of chess.com says. Let's see the details. No brilliant moves. Great moves. 3 for Aidan, 2 for me. Best, 17 for Aidan, 14 for me. Excellent, 6 for me, 7 for Aidan. Good moves, 3 each of us. Book moves, 7 each of us. Inaccuracies, quite a lot. 8 for me, 4 for Aidan. Mistakes, 6 for me, 9 for Aidan. Misses, 8 for me, 3 for Aidan. And blunders, 2 for Aidan. Quite a lot of our moves were in the negative category. But it was a very exciting game, a game that I had to use all my skills to the limit. But this concludes the coverage of the third round of the Connecticut Open. The next video will show what happened in the last game. How did I do? For now, I'd like to thank, of course, my opponents for playing so strong games and pushing the limit, all three of them, plus the fourth will come later. But also, all of you, the viewers, subscribers, if you have not subscribed, please consider clicking the subscribe button. The likes, if you like this video, you may want to click the like button. The comments that I've received, most of them were very good and positive. I am Harry Osiris. This is grecochess YouTube channel. Ladies and gentlemen, goodbye.